welcome in everyone to another edition of the GSMC College Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. I am your host, as always, Tommy Brzee. It is Friday, September 6th around here, and we have a great show for you today. We're going to start kind of wrapping up all of the Week 2 previews, just some under-the-radar games that I just want to dive into really quickly. We'll do a little bit of a rapid fire to start the show. Then we'll get into the players and coaches that are under the biggest microscope going into this week. There are a ton of big-time games, and with that comes a lot of pressure on some different players and coaches around the country, so we'll get into that in segment 2. Then we'll get into Tommy's best bets. This is something that I probably should have started a little bit earlier on in the season, but I'm going to give out 8, 7, 6, somewhere around there, that amount of bets every single week, and we'll see where I land at the end of it. I'm not a betting man myself, so we'll see how this goes overall. But then we have questions heading into Week 2. There are tons of things after Week 1. You tend to have a big-time regression or progression to the mean in Week 2 and kind of want to figure out where that's going to come. And then at the end, we'll do a little bit of a weekend headline. There were a ton of things happening around the Big 12 and UConn, the House settlement, all the other stuff that I definitely want to update you guys on today. But before we jump in, I do want to remind you all we get tons of questions and comments throughout the show, and the best way for you all to get your question on the screen, we can have a fun back and forth here, is to use the super chat at the bottom of the chat on this. To use the super chat at the bottom of the sports network chat. You can see that little $sign there. Click on that, put your name in at any question that you'd like, and it will pop up on the screen. We can have a fun back and forth here. Sometimes it's a little bit hard to keep up with the chat on the side, so anytime you can use that makes life a little bit easier for us and definitely more interactive, which is definitely what I want. Again, you can also use the GSMCpodcast.net page, still up and working and does the exact same thing. So whichever one you're more comfortable with, absolutely utilize that. And then we can have a little bit of a discussion here, which is always fun. But let's get into these under-the-radar games. We've gotten into all of the big games throughout the week. We got into Texas-Michigan. I do have Texas winning that. We got into Nebraska-Colorado. Got Nebraska in that one. We got to Tennessee-NC State. I have Tennessee kind of rolling in that one. But there are a ton of other games that I think a lot of people are kind of overlooking because maybe they're not the most interesting games in the world, at least from face value, but we still have plenty to look forward to in these. And it starts tonight with BYU versus SMU, Friday at 7 p.m. This one is going to be a ton of fun because I think everyone's coming in saying SMU is the more talented team. They're at home. That's the way this game is going to go, and the line obviously shows that. But BYU has something that SMU just does not have, and that is one quarterback. They know exactly who their guy it is, Jake Ratzlaff, and I think he's a very talented kid. I think he was someone that last year came out of the gates very shaky, was very young, trying to figure out his way, but once he's gotten into his second year starting, I think he's going to be a lot more comfortable. And then you have Chase Roberts on that side, who is one of the most complete, terrifying wide receivers in the entire country that you might not know the name of, but very talented kid and could cause all types of problems for that SMU back end. I like SMU a lot. We saw much more of Kevin Jennings in Week 1 than we saw in Week 0, so I would expect that that's your quarterback going forward, but it's very much in between. I'd pick SMU to win this game, but I think it might just be ugly and come down to the wire in this one. Duke Northwestern is a really fun game because it's going to be really ugly. I'll be totally honest with you. Northwestern's favored by 2.5 right now, over under at 37.5, but this is kind of a test for college football fans. I always love these games late at night on a Friday where you have Duke against Northwestern, or you have, in past years, Vandy against Northwestern. I hate to do that, but the reality is there's always these types of games pretty much every week where if you watch this game, you are officially a college football freak. There is no coming back from that. You officially joined the cult of college football, and welcome to the club. It's great to have you because it is going to be a very weird quarterback matchup in this one and kind of a very fun one in some ways. It's going to be gross football, don't get me wrong, but I think we might just have some fun watching the dichotomy between these two quarterbacks. Malik Murphy is your typical pocket passer. He is not going to leave that pocket unless he absolutely has to. Can make plays with his legs if absolutely needed, but definitely not a feature of his game that you would write home about. Miles Wright on the other side is going to be able to do that. That's the way that he wants to go about business, is not going to be able to push the ball downfield the same way Malik Murphy is. So I think I'm going to pick Duke to win this one. I think this one, they're going to find a little bit of stuff on offense on Saturday or tonight, and I think they're going to have the ability to get just enough points. It's going to be ugly, don't get me wrong, but I think the Blue Devils win tonight and at least start their season on a relatively good note of beating Northwestern away. Baylor at Utah. So this one should be a conference game, right? But it's not. It sounds like this one was set up before Utah had joined the Big 12, had joined the Big 12. So they're going to play this one out as out of conference schedule. I think Arizona Kansas State is another one to watch for in a couple of weeks that has the same exact circumstances. So not going to hurt Baylor if they were to lose this game. And I think this is a great test for Utah in a lot of different ways, because the big question that everyone has, including myself, going into the Big 12 schedule for Utah is, do they have the physicality to do what they did in the Pac-12 in the Big 12? Because, as we know, Iowa State, Kansas State, Oklahoma State, all very, very physical teams, and I don't think there's that big gap between Utah and everyone else when it comes to that category. Baylor's a good kind of idea of where you stand. If you can hold up against Baylor, if you can take the fight to them, especially with a Dave Aranda defense, you're going to be in good shape, because Baylor might not be the greatest team in the world by any means, but they are definitely not going to be soft. They're not going to hand you a lot of things. They're going to tackle relatively well and at least make life tougher than it would be against anyone normal. So I think this one's going to be fun. Daquan Finn is the most dynamic player on the field. I just think Utah has like the next 5. So I think Baylor is going to be a little bit shocked here. I think Utah is going to want this one to be on the schedule for the Big 12, because I tend to believe that Utah is going to be able to roll in this one. This is a game that everyone's just got to tune into. I'm being totally honest. This is a game that's going to define one of the conferences in the Group of 5 for a very long time this season, and possibly decide who goes to the CFP from the Group of 5. These are two AAC teams, two teams that are right around each other in the odds to win that conference. UTSA just a nudge above Texas State in this, but at the end of the day, this is one of those games that's going to be just so much fun. Whenever you see a line that's absolutely even, you just love to see it, because it's a great game. It's two in-state rivals going at each other, a conference game. So this is kind of a group of 5 battle for Texas. It's not Texas A&M, but it's right there with them. It's a very, very fun in-state matchup that I think deserves a little bit more love. Jordan McLeod is the quarterback for Texas State, coming over from JMU, and they got some things to clean up. There's no doubt about that. UTSA was definitely the cleaner team in week 1, but I think the difference making of Jordan McLeod stretching the ball, or extending plays and making plays with his legs, is just too much. And then Owen McCown on the other side, yes, that McCown kind of wild, but Owen McCown on the other side makes this a really fun quarterback matchup. I'm going to lean Texas State in this one. I am very, very nervous about this one. I think it's going to be incredibly close, but I'll take Texas State to win this one and possibly set themselves up for an AAC title run. USF against Alabama we got to talk about, because I think everyone's looking at this line at 31 and saying, this one last year was very, very close, and I understand so much is different around Alabama than what it was a year ago, and they're finally going to start the guy that they probably should have started a year ago, but Saban had to send his message, that's for sure. But I do think this is one of those games where usually in these games you have a quarterback that is trying to do what he needs to do, get out by halftime, and stay healthy. That's the goal for these quarterbacks usually. It's not going to be the goal for Jalen Milroe on Saturday. I can almost promise you that. I think he's going to walk on that field trying to prove a point, because at the end of the day, this was the game. This was the game that entirely changed everything for him, where he had to watch as Tyler Buchner and Ty Simpson made a little bit of a mess of that game and let UCF hang around for a little bit longer than they should have. Now, I do love this USF team. I think they have so much talent. I think Byron Brown is one of those guys that put him on the field with any team in the country, he looks the part. He's so incredibly talented, and one of those guys that is just going to be incredibly fun to watch. I think USF can hang for a quarter and a half, maybe a half, but I think it's going to be ugly after that. I think Alabama's offense is going to get going. I think we're going to see some fireworks here, but I don't think Bama wants to see that by any means. But I do think we'll see a little bit, and I do think Bama gets it done. But let's speed up a little bit here. Oklahoma versus Houston. We've talked about this one a little bit over the last couple of days. Oklahoma favored by 4 touchdowns in this one, and I think it's just one of those week 2 matchups, right? We have a ton of them this week where one team played not so well in week 1, one team played absolutely lights out, and they might find their way back to the middle. I don't necessarily think Houston's going to be able to win this one, but OU is one of those teams that I think the offensive line is enough of a problem where some of these teams that shouldn't be able to play with you might have a shot because they make a couple of plays on the quarterback. Moving forward, another game that people are watching, Clemson, App State. I think everyone is watching this one as an upset special, and frankly, so am I. Clemson is in a very weird spot because they played Georgia last week, looked absolutely terrible. It was Georgia, to be fair. Frankly, on the other side, I think they should be Clemson and be able to handle that. But at the end of the day, it was Georgia. It's hard to gauge how good a team is based on, especially in the ACC, based on when they played Georgia. But at the end of the day, I did a hot take yesterday talking about I think Clemson wins this game but does not find their offense. I don't think that's all that hot of a take at this moment, if I'm being totally honest. It sounded hot when I said it. I think this offense is just clunky. I don't think they have the quarterback to run what they want to run. I don't think they have the receivers outside to really scare someone, at least right now, with those freshmen still developing. It's one to keep your eye on. App State can absolutely pull this off if they can make this game gross and slow and be able to run the ball with Joey Aguilar and the myriad of running backs that they have. But at the end of the day, I think this is going to be one of those games that Clemson walks out of it feeling or not so great, but with a win. They're going to walk out with a win, but then be like, we still have not figured out a lot of the stuff, and we have ACC games approaching very, very quickly. This is a great game. This late night slate really sneaks up on you and is going to give us a couple of games. The next three that I'm talking about, just going to be so much fun. And this is the main example I talked about earlier in the week. I think this might just be another OT game for Texas Tech in their second game. And I think that it's going to be tons of points. I think we're going to get up and down the field a ton. I don't think either of these teams could stop Molasses if they wanted to. It's going to be so much fun to watch these two teams go at it. Frankly, I'm terrified to pick either way on this game because I don't like either of these defenses, and the game could change on a dime. I think I would lean Texas Tech just because of what happened last week. I think they have the ability to bounce back just a little bit, but I don't like that pick at all. So I'm not going to touch that one in terms of betting, but at the end of the day, it's going to be a very, very fun game and one of those that might just keep you up just a little bit later than you want. Mississippi State against Arizona State is one that I absolutely love. I think you have a team in Mississippi State that everyone's talking about. They're the worst team in the SEC. They're not going to be nearly as good. Jeff Lebby getting into the conversation is going to take time. Arizona State on the other side has kind of built something in year two, looked really, really good in week one. And I think the biggest thing to me is the play caller special just jumps off the page. Kenny Dillingham versus Jeff Lebby is going to be downright fun. They're going to get up and down the field. They're going to go fast. They're going to make life tough on these defenses. And we're going to see points because of it. The over-under is at 58.5 for a reason. And frankly, I might just go the over on that one. But I think this is a great, great matchup. I think it's one of those where you'll find out just how far along Mississippi State is. Arizona State is not necessarily a big challenge or by any means or a great team. But at the end of the day, Mississippi State is going on the road in the second game of a head coach's career with a talented team, but it's still a very questionable team. If they can go in there and get a big-time win, then a lot of stuff changes, not necessarily for this year for Mississippi State, but I think for long-term, it makes them feel much more confident in what they are comparative to what everyone else is around the country. So I am going to pick Mississippi State to win this game. I think it's a little bit gross, but I do think Mississippi State gets it done in what's going to be probably a little bit of a barn burner. And then finally, we got to talk about Boise State at Oregon, another one that everyone's pointing to Boise State saying this is going to be the point where Boise State possibly makes some noise, causes some trouble for this team. I think that's a real possibility, no doubt about it. But at the end of the day, the story of the game is going to be, can Dylan Gabriel and can this offensive line dominate the way that likely they should be able to, and they should have been able to a week ago. So it's going to be one of those very interesting things that we're going to have to watch a little bit more closely. Maybe the box score doesn't show it fully, but maybe we see this offensive line look a little bit better or not, and then we have big-time questions going forward. I do like Oregon here. I think it's one of those things where Dan Lanning's going to have those boys ready to go. And they know that they did not do what they needed to do in week one, and they want to prove a point this week. So I expect them to win this one. I think Ashton Jeanty is the most remarkable player on the field, but I think Oregon has about the next 10. I think they have the ability to, at the very least, stifle that just a little bit. So I think it's going to be a really fun week. I think it's one of those weeks that maybe it doesn't have those marquee matchups, and we'll talk about this a little bit later, but it's got plenty of games that are going to be really fun to watch. And usually those weeks where you look at it and say there's not a ton on this slate, that's when you find some really, really fun games. So cannot wait for that. But let's take our first break here. When we come back, we're going to talk about the players and the coaches that are under the biggest microscope in week one. Who has the most to prove? Who is everyone going to be watching? And who might just have some very aggressive opinions one way or the other on Monday morning, depending on their performance Saturday. So we'll break that down right after this. So stick with us.